Coronavirus is a global contagion, and on that note, we begin with our top focus coming in from the United States as the deadly coronavirus pandemic has killed 865 people in the United States in just the last 24 hours. This is the highest death toll that has been recorded by the United States ever since the pandemic hit the world. The number of positive cases and death toll in the United States has also surpassed that of China, the place where the virus was first detected. Now, US President Donald Trump has warned that Americans of 2 tough weeks ahead and has predicted thousands of deaths in the coming months. In his address at the White House, he also called for people to mandatorily follow all guidelines for the next 30 days.
This is going to be one of the roughest 2 or 3 weeks we've ever had in our country. We're going to lose thousands of people. When I see 28, 29 people from the governor of New Jersey, 29 people. When you see 173 people died in New York yesterday, or whatever the number was, I think it was more than that. When you see the kind of numbers that we're witnessing, we've never seen numbers like that. So it's easy to be negative. And then everybody can be negative. But I'm a cheerleader for our country, and I want them to do a great job. So the number can be kept. And I've always said it. I want as few a number of people to die as possible. And that's all we're working on.
Donald Trump also promised that experts and other scientists were working around the clock to fight the lethal global crisis. He appealed to the people to brace themselves for the painful times, but also asked them to be hopeful, to expect positive results soon.
A very tough 2 weeks. And then hopefully, as the experts are predicting, as I think a lot of us are predicting after having studied it so hard, you're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel. But this is going to be a very painful, very, very painful 2 weeks. When you look and see at night the kind of death that's been caused by this invisible enemy, it's incredible.
Let's get in a sense of ground zero, and for that I'm joined in by our correspondent Jagrati Dave, who's joining me live from Washington DC with all the details. Let's quickly go across to Jagrati. Jagrati, a very good morning to you. Now, we just heard Donald Trump warning Americans of some very painful 2 weeks which lie ahead. What did Mr. President and the White House task force have to offer in today's press briefing?
Well, today, the president and his advisors went through the data that was behind the decision to extend social distancing to the end of April. If you remember, previously the president had suggested that the economy could reopen by Easter, but that clearly is not possible, and his mind has been changed based on the data that was presented by Dr. Birx, the coordinator of the coronavirus, the White House's coronavirus unit, and Dr. Fauci, who is one of the US's top experts on infectious diseases. And the modelling suggests that even with mitigation, 100,000 to 240,000 Americans could lose their lives to coronavirus. And they want to keep trying to flatten the curve and try to encourage Americans to engage in social distancing measures to try to prevent that number from being to that level. But today really was a presentation of the data. The president's tone was very different, and it has been increasingly different to his tone and his language earlier on. He described the next 2 weeks as painful. He's called the virus vicious, and he has clearly understood the severity of the pandemic and of the impact it will have on the lives of Americans.
Right. Jagrati, let's now also focus on New York, which is the epicenter. The New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, has complained that states have to bid for ventilators, competing with other states, something that has been dismissed by the US president. What do you make of the state of affairs at this point?
Yes, there are tensions between the state level and the federal government level. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, is overseeing the epicenter, essentially a state that is the epicenter of the crisis in the United States. And he's described, states bidding amongst each other for ventilators, a bit like being on eBay with 50 other states. And he was this was put to the president in the briefing, and the president was saying, well, states shouldn't have to bid like this because they'll up the price, of these bits of equipment, they should phone us up, and we can help them. The president is really adamant that they're doing a good job, and that the equipment is being given to states as and when they need it. He keeps talking about the stockpile of 10,000 ventilators that is needed for emergencies. But you look at the numbers here, and Andrew Cuomo is saying that New York needs 30,000 ventilators, which is a number far bigger than the stockpile that the federal government has. The president seems to suggest that some states are asking for more bits of equipment than they actually need. But there's also been some issues about some states getting more than what they requested. Some states, Florida, for example, is a state that's gotten everything that it has requested. Other states haven't. So there's clear sort of supply chain issues in the process of supplying kit, but also questions about shortages. Are there enough ventilators? Is there enough equipment for frontline staff, for health workers who are tackling this crisis?
Right, supply chain issues and shortages, that's a very valid point that you've made. Should other cities be learning from New York's case? And on that note, we must also talk about Detroit, which medical experts believe is all set to become America's next COVID-19 hotbed. Can the Michigan city be averted from meeting the same fate as that of New York?
Well, that is exactly what the health experts were saying in this briefing today, that their aim is to try to prevent hotspots, to prevent spikes in places like we have seen in places like New York and New Jersey. So on the graphs that they showed, the spikes of New York and New Jersey, some of the reasons for that were obviously the vast amounts of travel that in and out of a big city like New York. But other metro areas are areas that they are looking to. Chicago, the DMV, the Washington DC area, metro cities like that, they are trying to keep as flat as possible. They pointed to cities like Los Angeles and Washington. Washington was one of the first places where the virus emerged in the United States, and its peak has not been as severe as that of New York. So that's clearly something that health professionals are looking at, and this is what they're looking into their modelling. At the moment, the death toll, they say, between 100,000 and 240,000, the latest model suggests, is taking into account the spike in New York, which they say could skew the figures. But if they can keep the other metro areas and the other metropolitan areas flatter than New York, then maybe the overall death toll could be much less than the models, the extremities of the models that have been put forward today.
Right. Jagrati, forgive me for a slight digression, because the last day of the month in an election year in the United States is also a major fundraising deadline. But how do you fundraise in the middle of a pandemic? How presidential campaigns are fundraising right now?
Well, this is unprecedented. At the moment, the efforts of the government are clearly directed at mitigating the worst effects of this pandemic. The economy is something that the president has been able to fall back on as a campaign tool, as an argument to try to convince people to vote for him, because the economy is being strong under his watch. But of course, shutting down the economy because of a pandemic, all essential businesses in several states across the United States have been closed. There's stay-at-home orders, so people aren't going out of their homes unless it's for essential activities. So all of this is a cumulative effect on fundraising, on campaigning. At the moment, it seems that the president has said in these briefings that the economy is not his top priority, saving people's lives is. And that is a concern that every government across the world is clearly grappling with. But of course, this year, with the election coming up in November, it is going to be unprecedented, an election following a global pandemic which has really uprooted the rules, the normal rules leading up to an election.
Absolutely. It is going to be, it is unprecedented already. We'll have to wait and watch how the pandemic actually impacts the upcoming elections in the United States. On that note, thank you so much, Jagrati, for joining us on this newscast and sharing your views with us.